Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The morning sun painted Brooklyn's skyline in shades of amber and rose, its rays filtering through the gauzy curtains of Lila Harper's fifth-floor apartment. The successful pediatrician stood before her bedroom mirror, expertly weaving her dark hair into intricate cornrows, a skill passed down through generations of Harper women. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, though her mind wandered to the endless list of appointments awaiting her at the clinic. At 38, Lila had mastered the art of multitasking, a necessity when raising 9-year-old twins alone. The sounds of their morning chaos drifted up from the kitchen below, bringing both a smile to her face and a familiar ache to her heart. Every day, their voices grew to sound more like their father's, though they had no idea. "Mom, Theo ate the last waffle." Milo's indignant cry echoed up the stairs, followed by the distinct sound of a chair scraping across the hardwood floor. "Did not. It was my turn anyway." Theo's defensive reply came swift and sharp, their usual morning symphony beginning right on schedule. Lila sighed, securing the final braid with a small elastic band. "Boys," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone all mothers master, the one that somehow conveys both warning and affection in equal measure. "If you can't share peacefully, neither of you gets waffles tomorrow." The threat of a waffleless morning brought immediate silence, followed by the sound of theatrical sighing and the clink of a plate being pushed across the table. Lila smiled, knowing Milo would be cutting his remaining waffle in half to share with his brother. For all their bickering, her sons had hearts of gold. She descended the stairs, each step carrying her past framed photographs that chronicled their life together. School plays, birthday parties, science fairs, moments frozen in time, each one carefully chosen to tell the story of their little family of 3. What the photos didn't show were the nights she'd spent crying over old wedding albums, or the way she sometimes caught herself searching for Elias's features in their boys' faces. The kitchen was a battlefield of breakfast debris. Maple syrup created sticky constellations on the granite countertop, and somehow, despite her explicit instructions about using a plate, waffle crumbs had formed a trail leading to the breakfast nook. There sat her sons, mirror images in their private school uniforms, dark curls, still damp from their morning showers. Milo, older by 8 minutes and never letting his brother forget it, had his nose buried in a manga volume propped against the maple syrup bottle. His half-eaten waffle lay forgotten as he absorbed each panel with intense concentration. Lila noticed he'd already packed his backpack, neat and organized, just like his father used to be. Theo, on the other hand, was simultaneously working on a Rubik's Cube, eating his shared portion of waffle, and reviewing what looked like advanced math problems. His uniform tie hung loose around his neck, and his shoelaces remained untied. Breakfast plates and homework papers created a chaos zone around him that would have made any organizational expert weep. 10 minutes until the van arrives, Lila announced, reaching for her coffee mug. The scent of French roast, her one luxury in life, filled her nostrils as she took a careful sip. "Theo, please tie your shoes before you trip and break something." "Milo, comics away during breakfast. You know the rules." "It's manga, Mom." Milo corrected without looking up, though he did carefully mark his page before closing the book, and it's educational. It's about Japanese history. The romantic subplot determined that was a lie, Theo muttered under his breath, earning a kick under the table from his brother. Lila hid her smile behind her coffee mug. "Backpacks ready. Assignment folders signed? Lunch money?" The twins responded with synchronized eye rolls that made them look so much like their father that Lila's heart clenched. "Yes, Mom," they chorused, their voices carrying that particular tone of long-suffering patience that only pre-teens could master. She checked her watch, an antique timepiece that had belonged to her grandmother, its face gleaming softly in the morning light. The hands showed 7:45 a.m., which meant she had exactly 45 minutes to get to the clinic for her first appointment. Plenty of time, assuming the school van arrived on schedule. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Lila moved to the window, frowning at the dark clouds gathering over the city. The weather forecast hadn't mentioned rain. But then again, April, in New York, had always been unpredictable. She turned back to her sons, who were now engaged in their daily ritual of comparing their identical faces in the reflection of their phones, searching for any minute differences. "Umbrellas," she reminded them, pointing to the stand by the door where 2 matching blue umbrellas leaned. The boys had begged for different colors, but Lila found it easier to buy in pairs, less fighting that way. Milo hopped up first, his movement fluid and energetic. He'd recently started taking dance classes, though he'd sworn Lila to secrecy about it. Too many kids think dance is just for girls, he'd explained, and Lila's heart had ached at how early her sons were learning about society's arbitrary limitations. Theo followed more slowly, methodically packing away his Rubik's Cube and stacking his homework with precise movements. He'd inherited his father's analytical mind and attention to detail, though Lila tried not to dwell on such comparisons. A notification chime from both boys' phones broke the morning routine's rhythm. Lila watched as their expressions shifted from casual interest to disappointment. "Mom," Milo called out, though she stood mere feet away. "The van's not coming." "Mister," Jenkins texted. Something about the engine dying halfway down Atlantic Avenue. Lila's mind immediately began calculating alternate routes and timing. She could drop them off, but that would make her late for her first appointment, a newborn's 2-week checkup that couldn't be rescheduled. Before she could reach for her keys, Theo's voice cut through her mental calculations. "Mom, there's a car stopping outside, one of those fancy ones, like in your old magazines." Lila's heart stuttered as she moved to the window. Through the gathering storm clouds and the first fat drops of rain, she saw a sleek black Mercedes pull up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing a face she'd spent 10 years trying to forget. Elias Voss looked exactly the same and completely different. His dark hair had threads of silver at the temples now, and new lines creased the corners of his eyes. But his expression, that mixture of confidence and gentleness, remained unchanged. He was saying something to the boys, who had rushed out onto the stoop with their umbrellas. "He's offering us a ride." Theo's excited voice carried through Lila's phone. When had he called her? "It's that CEO guy, Mom, the one who donated our new science lab. Can we, please? The rain's getting worse." Lila's fingers trembled as she gripped her phone tighter. Of course, she'd known Elias had been making donations to the school. It was why she'd carefully avoided every parent event for the past year. But now, here he was, about to drive their sons to school. And none of them knew the truth. She watched as Milo pulled out his phone, likely to text her. The boys were good about asking permission, one of the many safety rules she drilled into them over the years. Lila's mind raced with possibilities. She could run down and reveal everything right now. She could make up an excuse and call a car service instead. She could. "Mom, are you there?" Theo's voice snapped her back to the present. "He says he's met us at the science fair, and he's on the school board. Plus, he has one of those parent parking passes on his windshield." Through the rain-streaked window, Lila could see Elias's profile as he spoke to their sons. He was smiling at something Milo had said, that same warm smile that had first drawn her to him 15 years ago at a charity gala, the same smile she sometimes saw on Theo's face when he solved a particularly challenging puzzle. Thunder cracked overhead, making her decision more urgent. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and she could see other parents hurrying their children into cars all along the street. Her fingers moved across her phone screen almost of their own accord, typing out a response that would set in motion events she couldn't possibly predict. "Okay," she texted back, "but send me his car's details and license plate." She watched as Theo showed the message to Elias, who nodded approvingly at the safety measure, always so responsible, so understanding, the same qualities that had made her fall in love with him before everything fell apart. Milo was already climbing into the back seat, his excitement palpable even from 5 stories up. Theo followed more cautiously, his analytical mind likely cataloging every detail of the luxury vehicle's interior. Lila's heart thundered in her chest as she watched Elias close their doors, checking twice to make sure they were secure. He looked up then, perhaps sensing her presence at the window. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Recognition flickered across his features, followed by a cascade of emotions Lila couldn't or wouldn't identify. She stepped back from the window, her hands pressing against her racing heart. In the street below, the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, carrying her most precious secrets toward their school. Lila moved through her apartment on autopilot, gathering her clinic coat and car keys, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. The morning's gentle amber light had given way to storm cloud grays, and as Lila locked her apartment door, she couldn't shake the feeling that this rain would wash away more than just the city's dust. Change was coming, as inevitable as the seasons. And all she could do was hope her carefully constructed world wouldn't wash away with it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Milo. "Mom, Mr. V says he knew you in college. How come you never told us you went to Columbia too?" Lila stared at the message, her vision blurring slightly. How could she explain that Columbia wasn't just their alma mater but the place where she'd first met their father, that the campus cafe where Elias had first asked her out still served the same vanilla lattes she couldn't bring herself to order anymore? Another text followed, this time from Theo. His eyes crinkle just like mine when he laughs. Isn't that weird? Lila leaned against her apartment door, closing her eyes against the surge of memories. Perhaps it was time for the truth to come out. Perhaps the universe, in its infinite wisdom, had decided 10 years was long enough for secrets and silence, or perhaps, as the thunder rolled overhead and her sons rode to school with their unknowing father, this was just the beginning of an even more complicated chapter in their lives. Either way, Lila Harper knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same after this rainy Monday morning when fate, in the form of a broken-down school van, had finally caught up with her. Chapter 2. An Unexpected Encounter. Elias Voss's morning had been meticulously planned, like every other aspect of his life. Board meetings, quarterly reports, and investment reviews filled his calendar in 15-minute increments. He'd built Voss Industries from a small tech startup into a Fortune 500 company by maintaining this level of precision, but as he drove through the rain-slicked streets of Brooklyn, all his carefully laid plans were about to unravel. His Mercedes cut through the storm with quiet efficiency, windshield wipers keeping time with the classical music playing softly through the speakers. Chopin's Violin Concerto, the same piece that had been playing the night he first danced with Lila at the Columbia University Spring Gala. He quickly switched it off, choosing silence over memories. The board meeting could wait. Something about those two boys standing in the rain had caught his attention. Something he couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the way the slightly taller one, he would later learn this was, Milo had shared his umbrella with a younger student rushing past. Or maybe it was how the other boy, Theo, had been solving what appeared to be advanced mathematics problems while simultaneously keeping watch over his brother. Elias pulled his car to the curb, watching as the boys huddled together under their matching blue umbrellas. Their uniforms marked them as students from Brighton Academy, the private school where he'd recently funded a new science wing. He'd avoided the dedication ceremony, sending his CFO instead. Large crowds brought too many opportunities for small talk. Too many chances for questions about his personal life. Rolling down his window, he called out to them, "Are you waiting for the school van?" I heard it broke down on Atlantic Avenue. Both boys turned, and Elias felt something shift in his chest. Their faces held an echo of something familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. "Yeah," Milo replied, stepping forward with an easy smile. "You're Mr. Voss, right? From the science fair last week. I saw you looking at our solar system model." Elias nodded, surprised the boy had noticed him. He'd slipped into the science fair briefly, curious to see how his donation had been put to use. "Your project was impressive, particularly the mathematical calculations for planetary orbits." Theo perked up at this, his previous suspicion giving way to academic interest. "You understood the calculations?" Most adults just commented on how pretty the planets looked. "I studied astrophysics before switching to business," Elias found himself explaining, though he rarely shared personal details with anyone. "The way you accounted for gravitational variations was quite sophisticated for your age." The boys exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire conversation. Elias recognized that silent communication. He'd had it once with his younger sister before she passed away. The thought sent an old ache through his heart. "I'm heading toward the school," he offered, watching another sheet of rain sweep across the street. "I'd be happy to give you a ride." Theo's analytical mind immediately kicked in. "We're supposed to call our mom first. It's one of her non-negotiable rules." "A very wise rule," Elias approved, trying to ignore how the mention of their mother made him think of another smart, safety-conscious woman he'd once known. "Please go ahead and call her." As the boys huddled under their umbrellas with their phones, Elias found himself studying them more closely. Milo bounced slightly on his feet as he talked, energy radiating from every movement. A worn manga volume peeked from his backpack, the same series Elias used to collect in college. Theo, by contrast, stood completely still, his eyes taking in every detail of the car's exterior, likely cataloging information for his mother. Their features struck him as hauntingly familiar, though he couldn't quite place why. Something about the way Theo's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how Milo's laugh seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep and joyful. It tugged at memories he'd locked away years ago in a box labeled "Before" in his mind. "Mom says it's okay," Milo announced triumphantly, already reaching for the car door. "She wants us to send her your license plate number, though, smart woman, your mother." Elias murmured, watching as Theo meticulously photographed both the license plate and his school parking pass before climbing in. The interior of the Mercedes filled with the controlled chaos that seemed to follow children everywhere. Backpacks were arranged, seat belts were clicked, and somehow, a complex debate about quantum physics had already begun between the brothers. But if Schrodinger's cat is both alive and dead until you open the box, Milo was arguing, then technically, couldn't you say my homework is both done and not done until the teacher grades it? That's not how quantum superposition works, Theo sighed, pulling out his Rubik's Cube. And Mrs. Delgado definitely won't accept that excuse. Elias couldn't help but laugh, remembering similar debates from his own school days. I tried that same argument with my quantum mechanics professor, he shared. Pulling away from the curb, he gave me an extra assignment on the Copenhagen interpretation. Both boys' eyes widened with interest. You studied quantum mechanics? Theo asked, his fingers pausing on the cube. At Columbia? Elias nodded, then immediately regretted mentioning his alma mater. Too many memories lived on that campus. Our mom went to Columbia, Milo exclaimed, leaning forward eagerly. She never talks about it, though. Did you know her? The question hung in the air like static before a lightning strike. Through the rearview mirror, Elias caught movement in a fifth-floor window, a familiar silhouette stepping back from view. His heart seemed to skip several beats as recognition dawned. Lila. After all these years, fate had led him to her children's school, to this moment of giving her sons a ride through the rain. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Yes, he answered carefully, his accent thickening slightly with emotion. I knew your mother at Columbia. The boys exchanged another of their telepathic looks. What was she like back then? Milo asked, his voice carrying an undertone that Elias couldn't quite decipher. As he navigated through the storm-darkened streets, memories surfaced like air bubbles in deep water. Lila in the university library, surrounded by medical textbooks, her hair catching the late afternoon light. Lila arguing passionately about healthcare accessibility in their shared ethics class. Lila dancing with him at graduation, her laugh echoing across the decorated hall. She was. He paused, choosing his words carefully. She was brilliant, determined. She wanted to be a pediatrician even then, spent every spare moment volunteering at children's hospitals. She's the best kid's doctor ever, Milo stated proudly. All her patients love her. She still volunteers at the free clinic on weekends, Theo added, his tone carrying that same mix of pride and protectiveness. Elias felt something twist in his chest. Of course she did. Lila had always put others first, had always fought for those who needed help. It was one of the countless things he'd loved about her. The school building came into view, its brick facade dark with rain. Other parents were hurrying their children inside. A parade of umbrellas and raincoats, creating a colorful scene against the gray morning. As he pulled into the drop-off lane, Elias felt an inexplicable reluctance to let the moment end. These boys, with their quick minds and kind hearts, had somehow broken through the careful walls he'd built around himself over the past decade. Thank you for the ride, Mr. V, Milo said brightly, gathering his things. Hey, maybe you could come see our play next week. We're doing Peter Pan. I'm playing Captain Hook, Theo added, a hint of pride breaking through his usual reserve. Milo's Peter, but only because he can do the flips, Theo continued, because I'm clearly the more athletic twin, Milo teased, dodging his brother's half-hearted swat. Elias found himself smiling, despite the emotional turbulence in his chest. I'd be honored to attend. I'll check my schedule. As the boys climbed out, protecting their backpacks under their umbrellas, Theo turned back with one last calculating look. Mom helps with costumes for the play, he mentioned, his tone too casual to be genuine. Just in case you wanted to know. Before Elias could respond, they were gone, merging into the stream of students heading inside. He sat there for a long moment, watching until they disappeared through the heavy doors. His phone buzzed with messages about the board meeting he was now officially late for. But for the first time in years, Elias Voss's carefully ordered world seemed to be shifting on its axis. Something about those boys tugged at his soul in a way he couldn't explain or perhaps didn't want to examine too closely. As he pulled away from the school, his mind kept returning to that brief glimpse of Lila in the window, to the familiar way Theo's eyes crinkled when he smiled, to the echo of his own laugh in Milo's voice. The rain continued to fall, washing away the morning's certainties and leaving questions in their place, questions that would soon demand answers. The board meeting would have to wait. For the first time in 10 years, Elias had something more important to think about than quarterly reports and profit margins. Chapter 3. Recognition and Revelation. Lila Harper had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times over the past decade. Each time she'd walked past Columbia's physics building, every time she'd seen Voss Industries in the news, she'd imagined what she would say if she ever saw him again. But now, standing in the rain outside her apartment building, every practiced word evaporated like morning dew. Through the Mercedes' rain-streaked window, she could see her sons chatting animatedly with their father, though only she knew the true weight of that connection. Milo was gesturing wildly, explaining something about his latest manga discovery, while Theo sat forward in his seat, that familiar analytical look, Elias's look fixed on some complex equation he was sharing. Lila's hands trembled as she approached the car, her medical coat growing heavier with rain. Behind her, the doorman watched curiously. He'd never seen Dr. Harper so rattled. She was always composed, always professional, always in control. But control was slipping away like water through her fingers as she drew closer to the man she'd spent 10 years trying to forget. Elias saw her first. She watched his hands tighten on the steering wheel, those composer's fingers beginning their nervous tapping, the same habit she'd noticed in Theo since he was old enough to solve puzzles. His eyes met hers through the rain, and time seemed to fold in on itself, like one of their old quantum physics problems. "Mom," Milo's voice broke the spell. "Mr. V knows all about the manga series you used to collect, the ones in that box you keep in the back of your closet." Theo finished, his sharp eyes darting between his parents' faces, the one marked "before." Lila's breath caught. Of course they'd found the box. They were their father's sons, after all, never content to leave a mystery unsolved. Lila. Elias's voice was soft, his accent thicker than she remembered, emotion making the familiar syllables of her name sound like a piece of music he'd never forgotten how to play. "Hello, Elias," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. The boys fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment, even if they didn't yet understand its full significance. Through the window, Lila could see Theo's fingers unconsciously tapping the same rhythm as his father's, a detail that made her heart ache with fresh intensity. "Your sons are brilliant," Elias said carefully, each word measured like elements in a complex equation. "Their understanding of quantum mechanics is remarkable for their age." "They come by it naturally," Lila replied, the words escaping before she could catch them. She watched his expression change as the implication hit him, saw the exact moment questions began forming behind those steel-gray eyes that Theo had inherited. "Mom." Milo's voice held a note of uncertainty she rarely heard from her usually confident son. "Are you okay? You look like you did when we found those old photos in the Columbia yearbook." The yearbook, another piece of evidence they'd uncovered, another breadcrumb, leading to a truth she'd kept hidden for so long. Lila could picture the exact page they meant. Her and Elias in the physics lab, surrounded by equations and possibility, both of them looking at each other instead of the camera. "I'm fine," she assured them, though fine felt like an inadequate word for the tempest of emotions swirling inside her. "We should let Mr. Voss get to his meeting." "Actually," Theo interjected with suspicious promptness, "he was telling us about the new quantum physics program he's funding at school. The one you said sounded just like your old research project at Columbia." Lila shot her son a look that clearly said, "We'll discuss your investigative tactics later." But Elias was already speaking. "The suspension system designs." He nodded, his voice taking on the passionate tone she remembered from their lab days. "The ones we developed for microsurgery equipment. I've been thinking of updating them with new quantum modeling." He stopped abruptly, caught in the undertow of memories. Lila could see them reflected in his eyes. Late nights in the lab, classical music playing softly, equations flowing between them like poetry. Thunder cracked overhead, making them all jump. The rain was falling harder now, soaking through Lila's coat, but she barely noticed. All her attention was focused on maintaining her composure as a decade of carefully constructed walls began to crack. "We should go up," she said finally, addressing her sons but unable to look away from Elias's face. "You both have homework." "But Mom." "Now, boys." They climbed out reluctantly, but not before Milo managed to say, "Thanks for the ride, Mr. V. See you at play rehearsal tomorrow." Play rehearsal, another carefully orchestrated encounter, no doubt. Lila made a mental note to ground them until college, even as pride at their ingenuity warmed her heart. "Lila," Elias called softly as she turned to leave. The boys, They're remarkable. She finished, allowing herself one last look at him. Yes, they are. She watched his expression shift as he processed everything hidden in that simple word. All the years of missed moments. All the questions he was finally beginning to ask. But before he could speak again, she guided the twins toward the building's entrance. Behind them, the Mercedes remained parked, its engine idling. Lila could feel Elias's eyes following them, knew he was seeing what she'd noticed from the beginning. Theo's analytical focus, Milo's expressive gestures, the perfect blend of their shared traits manifested in two brilliant boys. Later that night, after checking that the twins were actually asleep and not plotting their next scheme, Lila found herself sitting in her home office, staring at the box marked "Before." Inside lay the evidence of a love story interrupted by lies and misunderstanding, the same lies her sons had somehow begun to unravel. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "They have your determination and my curiosity. A dangerous combination. Lila." She smiled despite the tears threatening to fall. Yes, their sons were dangerous indeed, and somehow she suspected this rainy afternoon was just the beginning of their most ambitious experiment. Yet, Chapter 4. The Seeds of a Plan. That night, the Harper apartment was unusually quiet. Rain continued to tap against the windows, creating shadows that danced across the walls of the twins' shared bedroom. Milo lay in his bottom bunk, manga volume forgotten beside him, while Theo peered down from the top bunk, his ever-present Rubik's Cube spinning silently in his hands. "Did you see how they looked at each other?" Milo finally whispered, breaking the contemplative silence. "Mom's never looked at anyone like that before." "Like what?" Theo dangled his head over the edge of his bed, dark curls hanging like a curtain. "Like she was seeing a ghost," Milo mused, rolling onto his side to face his brother. "But like a ghost, she wanted to see. You know what I mean? You've been reading too many of those romance manga," Theo scoffed. But there was uncertainty in his voice. He'd noticed things too, how could he not? His analytical mind had been cataloging observations all day. "And you've been snooping in Mom's old photos too much," Milo countered, sitting up in bed. "Don't pretend you didn't notice, mister. Uwe has your exact same eyes." The Rubik's Cube stopped spinning as Theo processed this. "Not just the eyes," he said slowly. "Did you see how he taps his fingers when he's thinking, just like I do? And the way he tilts his head when he's solving a problem? Mom always says, I do that too." Lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating their room. The walls were covered in their interests. Milo's Japanese art prints and dance competition medals on one side, Theo's scientific diagrams and math competition trophies on the other. Yet, in the center, above their shared desk, hung a family photo, just the three of them at the beach last summer, their mother's smile bright but somehow incomplete. "I found something in Mom's closet last week," Theo admitted, pulling himself fully onto his bunk, "when I was looking for my missing chemistry set." "You mean when you were snooping?" Milo corrected with a knowing grin. "Investigating." Theo insisted. "Anyway, there's this box marked before. It's pushed way back behind her winter coats." Milo's eyes widened. "Did you open it?" "No," Theo sighed. "Mom came home early that day." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "But I did some research on Mr. V." "Of course you did." Milo laughed softly. Detective Theo, always on the case. Theo ignored the teasing, pulling up a web page. "Look at this article from 15 years ago. It's about his company's early days." Milo climbed up to his brother's bunk, careful not to creak the bed frame. They were supposed to be asleep. After all, the phone's blue light illuminated their identical faces as they studied the old news article. "Rising tech entrepreneur Elias Voss celebrates breakthrough medical software launch with fiancée Lila at Columbia University Gala." Milo read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "Wait, what?" "Keep reading," Theo urged, scrolling down to reveal a photograph. There, frozen in time, was their mother, younger, her hair styled differently but unmistakably her. She wore a midnight blue gown and smiled up at a man who could only be Mr. V, their joined hands displaying matching engagement rings. Holy quantum entanglement. Milo breathed, borrowing one of his brother's favorite expressions. "There's more," Theo continued, switching to another tab. "They got married 6 months later, but then nothing. All mentions of them together just stop about 10 years ago. Right around when we were born," Milo finished, the pieces falling into place. Thunder rumbled outside as the twins sat in stunned silence, processing this revelation. Below them, they could hear their mother's footsteps as she moved through her evening routine. The same routine they'd watched for 9 years. never questioning why there was no father in their story. He doesn't know, Milo realized suddenly. Did you see his face when we talked about Mom? He looked sad, like he missed her. And Mom's been avoiding him, Theo added. Remember how she skipped the science lab dedication and the board meetings she was invited to? She always said she was too busy at the clinic. Milo nodded, but she was really avoiding him. Another flash of lightning illuminated their room, and in that brief moment, the twins exchanged a look that carried years of shared understanding. They'd always been more than brothers. They were best friends, partners in crime. And now, perhaps, architects of their own family's reunion. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Milo asked, a familiar mischievous glint in his eye. That depends, Theo replied, already reaching for his notebook, the one where he planned all his most complex projects. Are you thinking about implementing a strategically designed series of seemingly coincidental encounters between Mom and Mr. V, utilizing our unique position as students at the school where he serves on the board, while simultaneously gathering more data about their past relationship through careful observation and research? I was thinking we should play matchmaker, Milo grinned. But your way sounds more scientific. We need a name for this operation. Theo mused, opening to a fresh page, something subtle. Operation Parent Trap, Milo suggested enthusiastically. That's literally the opposite of subtle, Theo sighed. And isn't that copyrighted? Operation Cupid, Milo offered. Better, Theo conceded, writing it at the top of the page. Now we need to be methodical about this. First, we need more information. That box in Mom's closet, already on it, Milo whispered, slipping down from the top bunk with practiced stealth. Mom always watches her medical shows at this time. The volume's so loud, she'll never hear us. Wait, Theo called softly, reaching under his pillow. Take my lockpick set. The box might be locked. I don't want to know why you have a lockpick set. Milo shook his head but took the tools anyway. Science club, Theo shrugged. We're studying mechanical engineering. As Milo crept toward their bedroom door, Theo began outlining their plan in his notebook. Years of competitive chess had taught him to think several moves ahead, to anticipate obstacles and plan countermoves. Phase 1, he wrote, intelligence gathering. Investigate contents of before box. Research Mr. V's company history. Monitor Mom's reactions to mentions of Columbia. Test Mr. V's reactions to casual mentions of Mom. Phase 2. Orchestrated encounters school van mechanical issues. Homework questions requiring parental consultation. Strategic use of school events. Phase 3. Theo paused, chewing his pencil. The final phase would depend on what they discovered. Something had torn their parents apart, and before they could fix it, they needed to understand what it was. Milo's return interrupted his planning, his brother's face pale, his hands clutching what looked like an old newspaper clipping. Theo, he whispered, climbing back to the top bunk, I think we just found Phase 3. The article's headline glared up at them. Corporate secretary admits to fabricating evidence in CEO scandal. Below it, a photograph showed a younger Mr. V leaving a courthouse, his face drawn with exhaustion and hurt. There's more, Milo said, spreading out other papers from the box. Love letters, wedding photos, and hospital records from right after their divorce, when Mom found out she was pregnant. With us, Theo finished, his voice barely audible. The rain outside intensified, matching the storm of emotions in their room. Everything they thought they knew about their family was shifting, revealing a deeper, more complex story beneath. We have to fix this, Milo declared, his usual playful demeanor replaced by determination. Theo nodded, adding a final line to his notebook. Phase 3. Revelation and reconciliation. In the dim light of their bedroom, surrounded by pieces of their parents' past, the twins began to plot. They had inherited their mother's determination and their father's strategic mind, though they didn't know about the latter yet. Most importantly, they had each other. Operation Cupid was officially underway. Chapter 5. Operation Cupid. The early morning sun painted golden patterns through Brighton Academy's stained glass windows, casting a warm glow over the library's oak tables where Milo and Theo sat, surrounded by treasures from their mother's past. The discovery of the before box the previous night had given them not just answers but hope that what had been broken could be mended. I've never seen Mom look this happy, Milo said softly, touching a photograph where Lila Harper smiled radiantly at the camera, her arms full of research papers and her eyes bright with purpose. Beside her stood Elias, looking at her instead of the camera, his expression one of pure adoration. "Look at the date," Theo pointed out, his finger tracing the numbers written on the back. This was taken 3 months before they won the Medical Innovation Award for their surgical equipment design. He'd spent hours researching their parents' academic achievements, piecing together the story of 2 brilliant minds who had found each other in the vast halls of Columbia University. The boys had spread their discoveries across the library table: photographs, academic papers, newspaper clippings, and most precious of all, the love letters they'd found carefully preserved at the bottom of the box. Each item told part of a story, their story that had been interrupted by lies and misunderstanding. "Mom still works the same way," Milo observed, pointing to an old photo of Lila surrounded by organized chaos, papers, coffee cups, and musical scores scattered around her study space. "Remember how her home office looks when she's working on a difficult case?" Theo nodded, picking up another photograph. This one showed their father demonstrating something at a whiteboard, his hands frozen mid-gesture as he explained a complex equation, and Dad does the same thing when he's explaining quantum mechanics. That exact same expression. The similarities between their parents' past and present were striking. In one photo, young Lila bit her lip in concentration as she reviewed research data, the same way she did now when examining patient charts. Another showed Elias tapping his finger in that distinctive rhythm while lost in thought, a habit both he and Theo still shared. Mrs. Lynn, the elderly librarian who had worked at Brighton Academy for over 30 years, approached their table with a gentle smile. She'd known many students over the decades, but these twins held a special place in her heart. "Such old photographs," she commented, adjusting her glasses. "Your mother was a student here too, wasn't she?" "No, these are from Columbia," Theo explained, "from when Mom and Mr. Voss were research partners." "Mrs. Lynn's eyes widened with recognition. "Ah, no wonder I thought I saw something familiar in both of you. You have your father's way of solving problems, and your mother's determination." The twins exchanged startled looks. "You knew?" Milo asked. The librarian's eyes twinkled. "I've been here a long time, dear. I remember when Mr. Voss first came to join the school board, the way he looked at your mother during that first parent-teacher meeting. Some things don't change with time." She shuffled away, leaving the boys to digest this new piece of information. Their plotting had just gained an unexpected ally, someone who had witnessed their parents' past connection firsthand. Their planning was interrupted by Mrs. Delgado's arrival, her arms full of scripts and her face pinched with worry. "Oh, boys, thank goodness you're here. We have a serious situation with the play." The twins listened as she outlined the problems. The rigging system for the flying scenes needed professional certification. The costume department was overwhelmed with alterations, and they needed parent volunteers with specific expertise. "Mr. Voss is an engineer," Theo suggested thoughtfully. "He designed medical equipment, didn't he? He'd know all about safety systems, and Mom's got steady hands from surgery," Milo added. "Plus, she's great with measurements and fittings." Mrs. Delgado brightened immediately. "Would you ask them? They've both been so supportive of the school." After she left, the twins began formulating their plan, not an elaborate scheme this time, but a simple path to reconciliation. They remembered the letter they'd found in their father's company archives, where he wrote about equations that took time to solve, but were worth every moment of calculation. "First," Theo said, pulling out his notebook, "we need to create the right environment." He began listing elements that had been important in their parents' past: music, especially Tchaikovsky's violin concerto, scientific collaboration, the joy of helping others, shared memories of Columbia. Milo added his own observations: Mom's love for classical music while working, Dad's habit of explaining complex things simply, their shared passion for improving medical care, the way they both lit up when talking about their old research. That afternoon, they transformed a corner of the auditorium into a subtle reminder of their parents' shared past. Lila's old research papers were carefully arranged among the costume materials. The violin concerto that had played during their first dance at the Columbia Spring Gala filled the air softly. Photos from their university days lay casually among the stage props. When Elias arrived to inspect the rigging, he stopped abruptly at the sound of the music. Moments later, Lila appeared for costume duty, her steps faltering as the familiar melody wrapped around her like a forgotten embrace. "You kept the music sheets," Elias said softly, noticing the yellowed pages among the papers. "You kept everything else," Lila replied, her eyes falling on the old photos. "I found your letter in the Columbia archives." The twins watched from the wings as their parents gravitated toward each other. drawn by memories and music and years of unspoken words. No elaborate schemes were needed, just the simple truth of two hearts that had never truly forgotten each other. Mrs. Delgado gathered the cast for rehearsal, leaving Lila and Elias in their own world by the costume rack. Their hands brushed as they both reached for an old photograph, and neither pulled away. "I never read the whole article," Lila admitted quietly, "about Victor and the scandal. I was too hurt, too afraid of what I might find. And I never looked hard enough for you," Elias responded, his accent thickening with emotion. "I should have known you'd go to Boston. You always talked about their pediatric programs." Throughout the afternoon, the twins watched their careful plan unfold. Lila helped with costumes while Elias examined the rigging, but their eyes kept meeting across the auditorium, each glance carrying the weight of a decade's worth of unspoken words. During a break in rehearsal, Theo noticed their father studying an old equation scribbled in the margins of a research paper. Complex mathematical symbols interwoven with musical notations. "Mom says music and mathematics are just different languages for the same truth," he commented casually. "She used to say that in our study sessions." Elias smiled, lost in memory. "She could explain quantum mechanics using Mozart. Did you know that?" "She still does," Milo chimed in. "She taught us about wave functions using Beethoven's Fifth." The look of pride and longing on their father's face told them their simple plan was working. Sometimes, the twins realized, the most powerful catalyst for change wasn't clever schemes or elaborate plots, but the honest truth of hearts finding their way back to each other. As evening fell, the auditorium glowed with warm light. The violin concerto continued to play softly as Lila and Elias worked together to solve the technical challenges of bringing Neverland to life on stage. Their movements around each other were like a carefully choreographed dance, each step bringing them closer to understanding. "They're going to be insufferably pleased with themselves," Lila murmured to Elias as they watched their sons rehearse the sword-fighting scene. "They deserve to be," he replied softly. They solved an equation that stumped both their parents. The twins exchanged triumphant looks as they moved through their stage combat. Operation Cupid was succeeding, not through complex manipulation but through the simple power of truth, memory, and love that had never really died. That night, as they packed up their props and costumes, the boys noticed their parents lingering by the piano, where sheet music for the violin concerto still lay open. "Some things," Theo observed wisely, "don't need quantum mechanics to be explained, just time." Milo agreed, watching their father help their mother with her coat, his gesture full of remembered tenderness. As they left the auditorium, Tchaikovsky's notes fading behind them, the twins knew that their simple plan had set something profound in motion. Like the best scientific discoveries, sometimes the most elegant solution was also the simplest, creating space for truth to flourish and love to find its way home. Chapter 6. The School Play Scheme. Brighton Academy's auditorium buzzed with the controlled chaos of play rehearsals. Sets were half-painted, costumes lay in various stages of completion, and excited children darted between harried parent volunteers. In the midst of it all, Milo and Theo Harper orchestrated their most ambitious plan, yet, "Mrs. Delgado," Milo called out, perfectly timing his interruption as their father walked past. "The rigging for the flying scenes isn't working right. Could Mr. V check it? He's an engineer, after all." The drama teacher, already overwhelmed with directing 30 energetic children, gratefully waved Elias toward the stage. "Oh, would you mind? We can't have Peter Pan crashing into the props." "I'd be happy to help," Elias replied, setting down his architectural plans for the set design. His eyes unconsciously drifted toward the costume department, where Lila sat surrounded by fabric and measuring tape. Theo, positioned strategically near his mother, executed his part of the plan. "Mom, I think my hook is loose again," he announced loudly enough to carry across the auditorium, "and I need to practice the sword fight scene with Milo. Could you bring it to the stage?" Lila looked up, her fingers stilling on the costume she was mending. Through the stage lights, she could see Elias examining the flying harness that would soon hold their son. Her heart clenched at the sight. How many times had she imagined him doing ordinary parental things like this? "Coming," she called, gathering the captain's hook and her courage. As she approached the stage, Milo gave his brother a subtle thumbs up from behind the curtain. "The main cable needs to be reinforced," Elias was saying, his accent thickening slightly as it always did when he concentrated. "The current rigging won't provide enough stability for the aerial sequences. Like in that engineering project you helped Mom with at Columbia?" Theo asked innocently, watching both parents freeze. the one about tensile strength in suspension systems, Lila nearly dropped the hook she was carrying. That project their first collaboration, the beginning of everything. Of course, the boys had found that old research paper in the box. They seemed to have found everything else. You remember that project? Elias asked softly, his eyes meeting Lila's across the stage. You used music to explain the wave patterns, she replied, before she could stop herself. Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. You said the mathematics of music and engineering weren't so different. The auditorium seemed to fade away as they looked at each other. Years of unspoken words hanging in the air between them. Even Mrs. Delgado fell silent. Sensing the weight of the moment, Milo seized the opportunity. That's perfect. We need background music for the Neverland scenes anyway. Mr. V, didn't you tell us you have that piece on your phone? Before either parent could react, Theo had connected Elias's phone to the auditorium sound system. The first notes of Tchaikovsky filled the air, and both Lila and Elias were transported back to a sunlit Columbia laboratory where complex equations and classical music had woven together to create something more than just a research project. We should test the rigging, Lila said finally, her voice barely steady, with the music, to check the timing. Elias nodded, unable to trust his own voice. Together, they began examining the cables and harness, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked. Neither noticed their sons exchanging triumphant grins in the wings. The tensile strength needs adjustment here, Elias pointed out, his fingers brushing against a cable, and the weight distribution should be recalculated, Lila added. Automatically falling into their old pattern of collaborative problem-solving, they worked in synchronized efficiency. Muscle memory from countless study sessions taking over, the violin concerto continued to play, its familiar melody wrapping around them like a cocoon of shared memories. Do you remember, Elias began hesitantly, the night we solved the final equation? Lila's hands stilled on the rigging. You bought coffee from that little cafe on Amsterdam Avenue. We stayed in the lab until sunrise. You fell asleep on the calculations. He smiled softly. I still have the paper with the drool marks on it. You keep it in your desk drawer at the office, Theo chimed in, making both parents jump. We saw it when we were helping organize the science fair donations. Lila shot her son a look that clearly said, We'll discuss your snooping later. But Elias seemed lost in thought. I kept everything, he admitted quietly. Just for her ears. Every note, every paper, every— Mom kept things too, Milo interrupted, apparently materializing from nowhere, in a box marked, before. Lila finished, meeting Elias's gaze. Yes, I did. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken questions and answers. Then Mrs. Delgado's voice shattered the spell, calling everyone back to rehearsal positions. We should get back to work, Lila said quickly, stepping away from the rigging. Milo needs to practice his flying scenes. Of course, Elias nodded, his composer's fingers tapping that familiar nervous rhythm against his leg. But Lila, she turned back, her heart racing at the way he said her name, like a piece of music he'd never forgotten how to play. The calculations for the weight distribution, perhaps we could review them over coffee. Before Lila could respond, both twins suddenly needed immediate attention for costume adjustments, prop malfunctions, and various other suspiciously timed emergencies that required both parents' involvement for the rest of the rehearsal. Later that night, as Lila tucked the boys into bed, she paused in their doorway. You two are too clever for your own good, she said softly. We learned from the best, Theo replied, not even pretending not to understand. Both of you, Milo added meaningfully. Lila shook her head, but they could see the ghost of a smile playing at her lips as she left. Tchaikovsky still echoing in her mind. Phase 2 is definitely working, Theo whispered once she was gone. Better than we planned, Milo agreed. Did you see how they looked at each other during the violin solo? Like quantum particles finding their entangled pair? Theo nodded sagely in the darkness of their room. The twins updated their operation notes. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new schemes, and hopefully, more moments of connection between their parents. After all, as every good scientist knew, sometimes the most complex equations had the simplest solutions. You just had to know which variables to adjust. Chapter 7. Memories resurface. The autumn evening wrapped around the Harper apartment like a soft blanket, streetlights casting warm shadows through the windows. Lila sat at her home office desk, surrounded by patient files that should have had her full attention. Instead, her eyes kept drifting to the closet where a certain box had lived for the past decade. The sound of the twins sneaking past her office door for the third time finally made her smile. Boys, she called out, If you have something to say, just come in." Milo and Theo appeared in the doorway, trying and failing to look innocent. They'd been unusually attentive since the play rehearsal, watching her with those analytical eyes that reminded her so much of their father. "We were just wondering," Milo began, shooting his brother a meaningful look, "about the Columbia Physics Lab renovation." Lila's hand stilled on her paperwork. "What about it?" "Mr. V is overseeing the project," Theo explained, settling into his favorite spot on her office couch. "He mentioned they found some old research papers while clearing out the storage rooms, papers with your name on them." The twins watched as their mother's expression shifted, memories clearly playing across her face. "The suspension system project," she murmured, almost to herself. "He said they're preserving them," Milo added carefully. "In the university archives, he called them groundbreaking work that changed multiple lives." Lila stood abruptly, moving toward the closet before she could second-guess herself. The twins exchanged excited glances as she pulled out the box marked "Before," its edges worn from years of being moved but never opened. "I suppose," she said softly, "it's time you knew the whole story." The box opened with a soft creak, releasing the scent of preserved paper and old memories. On top lay a stack of research papers, the Columbia University letterhead still crisp despite the years. "Your father and I," Lila began, running her fingers over the familiar handwriting that filled the margins. "We met in that physics lab. I was pre-med, taking advanced physics as an elective. He was engineering, with a focus on medical technology. We were paired for a project on suspension systems and their potential applications in surgical equipment." She pulled out a photograph. Two young students surrounded by equations on whiteboards, both laughing at something outside the frame. "He used music to explain complex physics concepts. Said the mathematics of Tchaikovsky could solve any engineering problem." The twins settled on either side of her as she continued through the box's contents. Each item told part of their story. Coffee-stained calculation sheets, ticket stubs from symphony performances, a sketch of a medical device that would later become one of Voss Industries' breakthrough products. "You were more than just study partners," Theo observed, noting how their equations flowed together on the pages, one's handwriting completing the other's thoughts. "We became partners in everything," Lila admitted, reaching deeper into the box. "Your father had this brilliant idea about combining medical technology with his engineering expertise. We spent countless nights in that lab, building the foundation of what would become his company." She paused, pulling out a newspaper clipping. Their engagement announcement. The young couple in the photo radiated joy, their whole lives stretching out before them, full of promise. "What happened?" Milo asked softly, though they already knew part of the answer. Lila's fingers trembled as she reached the next layer of papers. "Success happened. The company grew faster than anyone expected. Board members were appointed, including Victor Langston." Her voice hardened at the name. "He had his own vision for the company's future, one that didn't include your father's focus on medical technology." She pulled out another clipping, this one worn from being handled many times. The headline glared up at them. "Corporate Secretary admits to fabricating evidence in CEO scandal." "But this shows he was innocent," Theo pointed out, his analytical mind racing. "The secretary admitted to creating fake evidence. I didn't know that then," Lila whispered, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I found what I thought were messages between your father and his secretary. Private messages, romantic ones. Victor had orchestrated the whole thing, using created screenshots and faked emails. By the time the truth came out, you were already gone," Milo finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. Lila nodded, pulling out divorce papers with trembling hands. "I was so hurt, so angry. I signed these without giving him a chance to explain." And 2 weeks later, she reached the bottom of the box, where a folded hospital report lay waiting. "You found out about us," Theo said quietly. "Twins." Lila smiled through her tears. "The biggest surprise of my life. I was still so hurt, still believing the lies, that I convinced myself I could do it alone, that it was better that way." "But you kept everything," Milo observed, gesturing to the box's contents. "All these years, some things you can't let go of," Lila admitted, picking up an old photograph of Elias in his lab coat, that familiar half-smile on his face. "Even when you think you should," as if summoned by their conversation, a familiar black Mercedes pulled up outside their building. Through the office window, they could see Elias stepping out, holding what looked like old research papers. "He's here for the play rehearsal coordination meeting," Theo reminded them, Though his innocent tone fooled no one, they had definitely planned this. "Mom," Milo asked softly, "don't you think it's time the truth is out now? The real truth?" Lila stood at the window, watching as Elias paused to look up at their apartment. Even from this distance, she could see him tapping that familiar nervous rhythm against his leg. "He kept everything too," Theo added. "We saw his office at the school board meeting. He has the same kind of box." The doorbell rang, its sound echoing through the apartment like a symphony's opening note. Lila looked down at the papers in her hands, the evidence of a love story interrupted by lies but never truly ended. "Boys," she said finally, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "why don't you go let your father in?" The twins exchanged triumphant looks before racing to the door. Behind them, Lila carefully gathered the papers that told the story of their past. Perhaps it was time to start writing the next chapter. Through the open window, Tchaikovsky's familiar notes drifted up from Elias's car stereo, the same violin concerto that had played in the physics lab all those years ago. Some equations, it seemed, were just waiting for the right moment to be solved. Chapter 8. The Truth in Old Papers. Twilight painted deep shadows across Lila Harper's home office as she dozed in her desk chair, still wearing her medical coat from a long day at the clinic. The evening light caught the silver threading through her dark curls, and her face, usually composed, showed the vulnerability of sleep. Scattered across her desk lay the contents of the before box, each item a piece of the puzzle that had shaped their family's destiny. Milo found her like this. The old newspaper spread before her like a map to the past. His breath caught as he read the bold headline: "Corporate Secretary admits to fabricating evidence in CEO scandal. Former board members plot to oust Voss Industries. CEO exposed." "Theo," he whispered urgently into his phone, "get up here now. Code Quantum. This is bigger than we thought." His twin appeared moments later, slightly out of breath from taking the stairs 2 at a time. Together, they approached their mother's desk with the careful movements of archaeologists, discovering a precious artifact. Theo pulled out his ever-present notebook, hands trembling slightly, as he began to read the article aloud in a whisper. In a shocking revelation that has rocked the medical technology industry, former Voss Industries board member Victor Langston's attempt to seize control of the company has been exposed as an elaborate fraud. Nora Bennett, who served as corporate secretary during the controversial period, has come forward with a full confession about her role in fabricating evidence designed to destroy CEO Elias Voss's personal and professional reputation. "Mr. Langston provided me with doctored emails and photographs," Bennett stated in her sworn testimony. "He threatened my position if I didn't help him create a false narrative about an affair between Mr. Voss and myself. The truth is, Mr. Voss was nothing but professional, dedicated to both his company's medical mission and his marriage." The confession reveals a calculated plot to force Voss out of the company he founded, with the ultimate goal of shifting its focus from innovative medical technology to more profitable defense contracts. "The hardest part was watching Mr. Voss's life fall apart," Bennett added, visibly emotional during her testimony. "He lost everything, his marriage, his home, his faith in people, all because of lies I helped create. I can never fully atone for that." The twins exchanged heavy looks as they continued reading. The article went on to detail how the truth had emerged 3 weeks after their mother had signed the divorce papers, and just 2 weeks after she had discovered she was carrying twins. "Look at the date," Milo pointed out, his finger shaking slightly. "Mom was already gone by then. She never knew. And too hurt to read business news," Theo added, consulting his timeline. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Their mother stirred slightly, and both boys froze. But Lila only shifted in her sleep, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on another document, what appeared to be a letter written in their father's distinctive handwriting. With movements worthy of their most delicate science experiments, they eased the letter from under their mother's hand. The paper was worn at the creases, evidence of being read many times over the years. "My dearest Lila," Theo read softly, "by the time you read this, the truth will have emerged in the press. Victor's plot has been exposed, but I fear it's too late. You've gone where even my lawyers can't find you, and perhaps that's what you want. But in case you ever see this, know that I never betrayed our love. Every moment we shared, from that first equation in the physics lab to our last breakfast together, was real and true. I'll respect your wish for silence, though it breaks my heart. But I'm leaving this letter with the university archives, along with all our research papers, in hopes that someday you might return to where our story began. All my love, Elias." He tried to tell her, Milo whispered, carefully returning the letter to the desk. He left clues where he thought she'd look, but Mom was already gone, Theo concluded, making notes. Left New York, didn't she? That's why we lived in Boston until 2 years ago, until she got the offer to run the pediatric clinic here. Milo nodded. She must have thought enough time had passed. A soft sound from the doorway made them turn. Their mother stood there, fully awake now, watching them with tears in her eyes. How long have you known? The twins shared one of their silent conversations before Theo spoke. We found the article last week when we first started looking through the box, but we've suspected about Dad for longer, Milo added gently. Everything started adding up. The way he explains things, his mannerisms that match Theo's, his love for the same things we love, and the way he looks at you, Mom, like he's seeing something precious he thought he'd lost forever. Lila moved to her desk, gathering the scattered papers with trembling hands. I never read the article, she admitted. I was so hurt, so convinced by those fake messages. When I found out I was pregnant, I just ran, threw myself into preparing for you too. But you kept his letter, Milo observed. And everything else, some things you can't let go of, Lila whispered, touching the letter's worn edges. Even when you think you should. A knock at the apartment door made them all freeze. Through the evening quiet, they could hear the familiar sound of fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against the doorframe. A genetic trait passed down to one thoughtful boy who now shared a meaningful look with his brother. That would be Dad, Theo said casually, as if their father's unscheduled visit was completely normal. We might have texted him about finding some important papers that he needed to see. You didn't, Lila gasped, looking down at her rumpled medical coat and tear-stained face. We did, Milo confirmed, already backing toward the door. Because it's time, Mom. Time for both of you to see the whole truth together. Theo added, following his brother. Lila stood shakily, the letter clutched in one hand and the newspaper in the other. A decade of misunderstandings and hurt lay exposed on her desk. But so did the evidence of a love that had never truly died, preserved in coffee-stained equations, marginalia conversation, and a box of memories too precious to discard. The knocking came again, more hesitant this time. Through the door, they could hear Elias's voice. Lila. The boys said it was urgent. Something about the old Cambridge research papers. The twins watched as their mother took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders like she did before entering a difficult surgery. It's time, she whispered, more to herself than them. Then louder, coming. As Lila moved toward the door, Milo and Theo exchanged triumphant fist bumps. Phase 3 of Operation Cupid was officially underway. The phase where truth would finally unravel a decade of lies, and perhaps weave something new from the threads of what had been broken. After all, as their father had taught them through quantum physics and their mother through healing, sometimes things that seem irreparably separated are actually connected in ways we just haven't understood yet. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. Everything came to a head during the final dress rehearsal of Peter Pan. The auditorium hummed with pre-show energy, but beneath the surface excitement ran a current of tension that had nothing to do with opening night jitters. The twins had orchestrated this moment with scientific precision. They'd accidentally jammed the prop room door while searching for Peter Pan's shadow, effectively trapping their parents inside. Through the small window, Milo and Theo could see their mother and father standing amid the cluttered shelves, surrounded by the physical representations of imagination and possibility. You never read the whole article, did you? Elias asked softly, his accent thickening with emotion as he held up the worn newspaper clipping the twins had strategically placed on the prop table. Lila's fingers trembled as she touched the yellowed paper. What article? About Victor and his plot, about the fake emails and photos. Elias's composer's fingers began their nervous tapping against a nearby shelf about how he nearly destroyed everything we built. The prop room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavy with a decade of unspoken words. Through the window, the twins could see their mother sink onto an old treasure chest prop, her medical coat catching on the fake jewels. I couldn't, Lila whispered, her voice catching. It hurt too much to think about that time, to remember. What exactly do you remember, Lila? Elias stepped closer, his tall frame casting shadows in the dim room. Because what I remember is coming home to an empty apartment and divorce papers on our bed. I remember finding intimate messages between you and Nora. Lila's voice hardened slightly. I remember my husband apparently sharing private jokes and late-night conversations with his secretary while I worked hospital rotations. Messages that Victor created, Elias countered, pulling another paper from his pocket. Nora Bennett's sworn testimony. Messages designed to drive us apart because he knew what? That you were my conscience. Elias's voice softened. That I would never agree to shift the company away from medical technology while you reminded me daily why we started it. That as long as we were together, his defense contract plans would never succeed. Outside the prop room, Theo scribbled furiously in his notebook while Milo pressed his ear to the door. Other students passed by, too focused on their own rehearsal preparations to notice the twins' surveillance operation. Inside, Lila had stood up, pacing the small space between pirate costumes and fairy wings. Why didn't you tell me when I found the messages? Why didn't you fight harder to explain? I tried. Elias's voice cracked slightly. I called, I wrote, I searched. But you disappeared, Lila. One day you were there, planning our future. And the next, I was pregnant, Lila whispered, so softly the twins had to strain to hear through the door. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the window, they could see their father frozen in place, his face a map of dawning comprehension and devastating realization. What did you say? Elias's voice was barely audible. I found out 2 weeks after I signed the papers. Lila's words came faster now, like a dam breaking. I was hurt and angry, and then, suddenly, I was responsible for 2 tiny lives. I convinced myself it was better to make a clean break, to start fresh somewhere else. By the time the truth about Victor came out, you were gone. Elias finished, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. With my children, our children, another silence fell, this one filled with the weight of a decade's worth of missed moments. First steps, first words, first days of school. Through the window, the twins could see tears streaming down their mother's face. Those boys, Elias said slowly, realization dawning in his voice. Milo and Theo, the way Theo analyzes everything. Just like you. Lila nodded. And Milo's love of manga, his dramatic flair. My mother was an actress. Elias smiled sadly. I never told you that. Never got the chance to share so many things. The sound of power tools from the stage made them both jump, remembering where they were. Lila wiped her eyes, leaving a smudge of stage makeup she'd been helping with earlier. They know, don't they? Elias asked suddenly. The boys, they figured it out. They're too smart for their own good. Lila laughed softly through her tears. They get that from both of us, I suppose. Is that why the school van keeps mysteriously breaking down? Elias added. And why they suddenly need quantum physics tutoring, and why they're constantly asking about Columbia and old research papers. Lila nodded, realization dawning. They've been playing matchmaker. Outside the door, the twins exchanged triumphant grins. Inside, their parents had moved closer together, drawn by the gravity of shared memories and newfound understanding. Lila, Elias said softly, reaching for her hand, I never betrayed you. What we had, the research, the company, our dreams, it was all real. Victor couldn't stand that our medical technology focus might limit profits, but he knew he couldn't change my mind as long as you were there, reminding me why we started it all. To help people, Lila remembered, to combine my medical knowledge with your engineering genius and create something meaningful. You were always the heart of everything. Elias's fingers intertwined with hers, an echo of countless late nights in the Columbia Physics Lab, the company, our projects, me, the sound of Mrs. Delgado calling for places broke through their moment. Through the prop room window, they could see their sons in full costume, Milo adjusting his Peter Pan collar while Theo practiced his Captain Hook sneer. We should get out of here, Lila said, though she didn't move away. They'll be looking for us. The door seems to be stuck, Elias observed, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Our sons are quite the strategists. Wonder where they get that from. Lila returned his smile, the first real one she'd directed at him in 10 years. A note slipped under the door, written in Theo's precise handwriting. The door will mysteriously unlock after you've both agreed to talk about everything over coffee, preferably at that cafe on Amsterdam Avenue where it all started, followed by a postscript in Milo's more flamboyant script. We're not subtle, but we are effective. Love, your desperately hopeful sons. Lila laughed, the sound carrying all the music of their past and, perhaps, if their sons had anything to say about it, their future. Well, she said, picking up the article that had started this confrontation, it seems we have no choice. Our children have spoken. They're as stubborn as their mother, Elias observed fondly, with their father's tactical genius. Lila added, squeezing his hand. Outside the prop room, Milo and Theo exchanged high fives before rushing off to their places on stage. Phase 3 was proceeding exactly as planned, even better than planned, because sometimes the heart remembers what pride tries to forget, and sometimes it takes being locked in a room full of make-believe to find your way back to what's real. Chapter 10. Revelations. The truth spilled out in that dusty prop room like stars appearing in a clearing sky, one bright point of light at a time. Until the whole constellation of their past was illuminated, the sound of rehearsal continued beyond the door, but inside their accidental sanctuary, Lila and Elias began the delicate work of reconstructing a decade of lost time. "Tell me about them," Elias said softly, settling onto an old steamer trunk beside Lila. "Tell me everything." Lila's hands twisted in her lap as memories flooded back. "The pregnancy was a surprise. Twins don't run in my family, but apparently they do in yours. My mother's sisters." Elias nodded, his accent thickening with emotion. "They were twins. I never got to tell you about them. Theo has your mother's eyes." Lila smiled softly. "I see it in the photographs you used to keep on your desk at Columbia. And Milo," Elias's voice caught, "his laugh is exactly like yours." "I noticed." Lila's voice caught. "Every time he gets excited about something in rehearsal, I hear my own joy echoed back. And Theo's analytical mind," Lila finished, "the way he breaks down problems. Just like his father designing medical equipment. They're the perfect blend of us both," Lila said. The prop room's dim light cast gentle shadows as they shared story after story. Lila described the boys' first steps, taken hand in hand, as if they couldn't bear to reach that milestone separately. Elias learned about Milo's secret passion for dance and Theo's growing collection of mechanical puzzles. The day they started school, Lila remembered, Theo created a probability analysis of which kindergarten activities would be most educational. He was 5, a true engineer's son. Elias laughed softly, then sobered. "You missed so much." "I'm so sorry," Lila whispered, tears threatening again. "When I found those messages, it felt like our whole world was shattering. I never stopped to question, to investigate like Theo would have. I just ran, and I didn't chase hard enough," Elias admitted. "I was so focused on proving my innocence, on saving the company's medical mission, that I didn't think to check the university archives where we first met, where you might go looking for answers." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the distant sound of children rehearsing their lines. Through the small window, they could see Milo soaring across the stage in his flying harness, while Theo directed sword-fighting choreography with scientific precision. "They've been planning this, haven't they?" Elias mused, watching their sons with newfound understanding. "All of it." Lila nodded, pulling out a paper that had fallen from Theo's notebook earlier. "Operation Cupid, that's what they called it. Look at these flowcharts. They mapped out every possible scenario." Elias studied the detailed plans with pride. Theo's organizational skills and Milo's creative strategy, they're brilliant. They're determined. Lila corrected gently. Like both their parents, the sound of a key turning in the lock made them both look up. Theo's face appeared in the small window, his expression serious despite his Captain Hook costume. "We're prepared to lock you back in if necessary," he announced gravely. "But first, there's something you need to see." The prop room door swung open to reveal Milo, still in his Peter Pan outfit, holding a laptop. "We found this in Dad's old company records," he explained, setting the computer on a nearby shelf. "It's security footage from the day everything fell apart." Lila's breath caught as the video began to play. There she was, 10 years younger, storming out of Voss Industries' main office. And there was Victor Langston, watching her leave with a satisfied smile before turning to Nora Bennett, with instructions to make sure those messages are untraceable. "Where did you find this?" Elias asked, his voice tight with emotion. "In the corporate archives," Theo explained. "We might have borrowed Dad's security credentials during the science fair setup, which wasn't strictly legal," Milo added quickly, but felt morally justified given the circumstances. "We are definitely discussing your hacking habits later," Lila managed through her tears, but her voice held no real anger. How could it, when their son's determination had finally brought the whole truth to light? The laptop screen showed more footage. Victor plotting with board members, Nora's eventual breakdown and confession, and finally, Elias's desperate search for Lila in the weeks that follow. "There's more," Theo said softly, pulling out his ever-present notebook. "We found Mom's old research journals in the Columbia archives, the ones about using music theory to stabilize medical equipment. Your equations about harmonic resonance in surgical tools." Elias remembered. The project that started everything. The university is still using them," Milo announced proudly. Dad made sure they were preserved. He told the archivist they were too important to lose, like their author, Elias added quietly, his eyes meeting Lila's. The sounds of rehearsal had faded away, leaving them in a bubble of recovered truth and possibility. Through the window, they could see the stage where their sons had been practicing their roles. Peter Pan and Captain Hook, supposed enemies whose story ended not in conflict but in understanding. All this time, Lila said softly, "I thought I was protecting them by staying away, but they're the ones who protected us from our own pride, our own hurt. They got that from you." Elias smiled. "Your heart, your determination to heal what's broken, and your strategic mind." Lila returned his smile. "Your ability to see solutions where others see only problems." A bell rang somewhere in the auditorium, signaling places for the final scene. Milo and Theo lingered in the doorway, their expressions hopeful. "We have to go fight our epic battle now," Milo announced, adjusting his green cap. "But this conversation isn't over," Theo added firmly. "We have extensive documentation of everything we've discovered, and we're prepared to present it in a structured format, with citations, complete with a PowerPoint presentation." Milo nodded solemnly. "We made charts." Lila laughed through her tears. The sound so familiar it made Elias's heart ache. "Go," she told their sons. "Be brilliant on stage. We'll be watching." "Together?" Theo asked, his father's analytical eyes searching their faces. "Together," Elias confirmed, reaching for Lila's hand. As their sons hurried off to their places, Lila and Elias emerged from the prop room into the dimming auditorium. 10 years of misunderstanding had been packed into that small space, but something new had emerged, something built on truth, forgiveness, and the unwavering determination of two remarkable boys who refused to let their family story end in separation. "They're going to be insufferably pleased with themselves," Lila murmured, as they found seats in the front row. "They deserve to be," Elias responded, his fingers still entwined with hers. They solved an equation that stumped both their parents. The stage lights dimmed, and the familiar notes of Tchaikovsky began to play. Not the violin concerto this time, but the score their sons had chosen for the Neverland scenes. As the curtain rose, Lila and Elias sat in the darkness, surrounded by the magic their children had created, ready to write the next chapter of their story together. Chapter 11. Healing Hearts. The weeks that followed the revelations in the prop room brought changes to the Harper household that felt both monumental and perfectly natural. Like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their proper places, Elias began spending evenings at the apartment, making up for lost time with an enthusiasm that matched his son's energy. One such evening found them all gathered around the dining table, takeout containers from their favorite Chinese restaurants scattered between complex mathematical diagrams and theatrical scripts. Milo was attempting to teach his father the choreography for an upcoming dance recital, while Theo explained his latest mechanical invention using chopsticks and fortune cookie papers as visual aids. "So, if the gyroscopic stabilizer maintains this axis," Theo demonstrated, spinning a chopstick through a carefully constructed paper model, "the entire system should maintain equilibrium, even under varying pressure conditions. Like in the original suspension system designs." Elias nodded, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "The ones your mother and I developed for microsurgery equipment." "Exactly," Theo beamed. "I found the old blueprints in the Columbia archives. The mathematical principles are fascinating, especially when you apply quantum mechanics to—" "Speaking of quantum mechanics," Milo interrupted, executing a perfect pirouette between the living room and dining area, "can we talk about how I definitely inherited Mom's grace and Dad's dramatic flair? It's like genetic performance art." Lila, watching from the kitchen doorway, couldn't help but laugh. The sound drew Elias's attention, and their eyes met across the room with shared amazement at their son's perfect blend of their traits. "Your father was quite the performer himself," Lila revealed, joining them at the table. "Did I ever tell you about the time he used interpretive dance to explain wave-particle duality to our quantum physics study group?" "Mom!" both boys exclaimed simultaneously, turning to their father with delighted disbelief. Elias's cheeks reddened slightly. "The professor said we needed creative approaches to complex concepts," he added, with a meaningful look at Lila. "Besides, it worked. You finally understood the double-slit experiment." "I understood that you were terrible at interpretive dance," Lila teased, the familiar banter feeling both new and wonderfully comfortable, "and yet you married me anyway." Elias responded without thinking, then froze, as the weight of the past settled briefly over the room. But before the moment could turn awkward, Theo pulled out his ever-present notebook. "Actually, about that," he began, flipping to a carefully tabbed section. "Milo and I have been compiling data on successful relationship reconciliations, particularly focusing on cases involving previously married couples with shared intellectual and professional interests. The statistics are quite promising," Milo added, dropping into a chair with theatrical grace, "especially when factoring in the presence of brilliant, well-adjusted children who are definitely not grounded anymore. Right? Nice try." Lila smiled, ruffling his hair. "You're still grounded for hacking into corporate archives. And for manipulating school transportation," Elias added, though his stern expression was undermined by obvious pride. "Worth it," the twins declared in unison. The evening continued to unfold with the comfortable chaos that only family can create. Elias helped Theo refine his invention's design, while Lila and Milo practiced dance steps in the cleared space by the windows. The city lights twinkled beyond the glass, a constellation of possibilities stretching out before them. Later, after the boys had finally been persuaded to go to bed, though the sound of whispered plotting still drifted from their room, Lila and Elias found themselves alone in the living room. The coffee table was covered with their old research papers. The twins had been systematically retrieving everything from the Columbia archives, determined to preserve their parents' shared history. "They're incredible," Elias said softly, picking up one of Theo's detailed analysis sheets. "Brilliant and determined and sneaky. Strategic," Lila corrected with a smile. "They see problems and refuse to accept that they can't be solved, just like their mother in the research lab. With their father's ability to think 10 steps ahead," Elias added, settling beside her on the couch. "Though I'm still not sure how they managed to hack your company's security system," Lila said. "Apparently, Theo wrote an algorithm to decode password patterns," Elias explained. "Torn between concern and admiration, and Milo created a distraction during the science fair that allowed them access to my login credentials. We're going to have our hands full with them." Lila laughed, then paused as the implication of her words sank in our hands. Our children, the future stretching out before them, no longer separated by misunderstanding and pride. Elias seemed to read her thoughts, his fingers finding hers in a gesture that had become natural again over the past weeks. "Lila," he began hesitantly, "there's something I've been wanting to discuss." Before he could continue, a crash sounded from the boys' room, followed by suspicious silence. Lila sighed, starting to rise, but Elias gently held her hand. "Let me," he said softly. "I've missed too many moments like this." Lila watched as he headed toward their son's room, his composer's fingers tapping that familiar nervous rhythm against his leg. Through the partially open door, she could hear the conversation. "Dad," Milo's voice carried a note of forced innocence. "We were just conducting a physics experiment about gravitational potential energy, using my old Rubik's Cube collection as projectiles," Theo added helpfully. At midnight, Elias's voice held barely contained amusement. "Science never sleeps?" "Exactly," both boys declared, using what Lila recognized as their father's exact intonation. The sound of Elias's laughter, mixing with their son's giggles, made Lila's heart swell. She moved to the doorway, watching as her former husband No. Her family's future helped the boys clean up their experiment while asking detailed questions about their hypothesis and methodology. "Mom," Milo spotted her first, "did you know Dad won the International Rubik's Cube Championship in college? 3 times, Theo added proudly. "We found the trophies in his old Columbia photos. Is there anything you two haven't investigated?" Lila asked, leaning against the doorframe. The twins exchanged one of their telepathic looks. "Well," Theo began carefully, "we haven't investigated wedding venues yet, but we have several spreadsheets ready when you're bed," Lila interrupted firmly, though her cheeks had flushed. "Now, but Mom, listen to your mother." Elias backed her up, though his own face had reddened slightly. "We can discuss your spreadsheets tomorrow," Lila said. After another round of goodnights and last-minute scientific observations, Lila and Elias found themselves back in the living room. The apartment felt different now, fuller not just with people but with possibility. "They're not subtle," Lila murmured, picking up a wedding venue brochure that had mysteriously appeared on the coffee table. "They come by it honestly." Elias smiled. "I seem to remember someone rearranging an entire physics department schedule to ensure we were paired for that first project." "That was purely scientific interest," Lila protested weakly. Your engineering approach to medical technology was revolutionary, and had nothing to do with my interpretive dance skills? Their laughter filled the room, years of separation dissolving in the warmth of shared memories and a new understanding. Outside, the city hummed with life, while inside, a family continued the delicate work of healing old wounds and building new dreams. From the boys' room came the soft sound of Theo explaining another scientific principle to his brother, their whispers carrying the same passionate intensity that had once filled a Columbia physics lab where their parents had first fallen in love. Some equations, it seemed, were meant to be solved together. Chapter 12. Full Circle. You knew, Lila whispered, staring at her sons across the dinner table, the remains of their celebration dinner, marking the successful end of the school play's run scattered between them. Outside, New York's lights twinkled like stars, while inside, the final pieces of their family's puzzle were falling into place. Milo and Theo exchanged one of their telepathic looks before answering. We found the old photos last month, Theo admitted, pulling out his trusty notebook, now nearly full with Operation Cupid's documentation, in that box marked, "Before in your closet." And then we Googled Mr. V, Milo added, his usual dramatic flair subdued by the moment's gravity. His eyes, they're just like Theo's. Plus, the way he explains quantum mechanics is exactly how Mom said her old study partner used to. Elias sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his sons with new eyes. All those times they'd made him laugh during their accidental meetings, all those familiar gestures and expressions he'd wondered about. Everything suddenly made sense. I never knew, he said hoarsely, turning to Lila. If I had... I know, she answered softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. I know now. Their fingers intertwined, a gesture that felt both new and achingly familiar. The twins high-fived under the table, their mission finally complete. Operation Cupid had succeeded beyond their wildest calculations, though they'd never admit how many backup plans they'd prepared for various worst-case scenarios. We're still grounded, though. Aren't we? Theo asked hopefully, his father's analytical mind already calculating probabilities. Lila laughed through her tears. Oh, absolutely. For at least a month. Worth it, Milo declared, watching his parents' clasped hands with satisfaction. Totally worth it, Theo added, pulling out yet another notebook. Besides, we can use the grounding time to finalize our presentation on the quantum mechanics of love, featuring case studies from Columbia University's physics department. Circa 15 years ago. You're not actually going to present that at school, are you? Lila asked, alarmed. Of course not, Milo assured her. It's for your wedding reception. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of both parents choking on their drinks. The twins watched with innocent expressions that fooled absolutely no one. We've already started the calculations, Theo continued, flipping through his notes, based on statistical analysis of successful reconciliations, combined with the astronomical significance of the upcoming spring equinox and the availability of the Columbia University Chapel. Milo interjected smoothly, and we've scouted caterers who can handle both vegan and traditional menus, because Theo's been reading up on sustainable event planning. You two are impossible, Lila managed, though her eyes shone with both tears and laughter. No, Theo corrected seriously. We're improbable. There's a significant statistical difference. The probability of identical twins successfully orchestrating their parents' reunion after a decade of separation is quite low. Milo agreed, adopting his brother's scientific tone. But not impossible, especially when factoring in inherited intelligence quotients and determination coefficients. Elias, who had been quietly watching this exchange, finally found his voice. You planned everything, didn't you? From the very beginning. The boys shared another look before Theo pulled out what appeared to be a massive flowchart. Would you like to see the complete operational breakdown of Project Cupid? We've included all contingency plans, statistical analyses, and a particularly clever backup strategy involving quantum entanglement theory and the school's production of The Phantom of the Opera, if Peter Pan hadn't worked out. We also have a PowerPoint presentation, Milo added helpfully, with animations and pie charts. Theo nodded. Dud likes pie charts. We found that out during the science fair reconnaissance. Lila and Elias looked at each other, years of separation dissolving in shared amazement at their son's incredible blend of their traits. I did always love pie charts, Elias admitted, squeezing Lila's hand, and I always loved how you could find humor in even the most complex equations, she replied softly. And I loved how you could make the most abstract concepts feel real. Like something I could touch. Speaking of equations, Theo interrupted, producing yet another notebook. We've developed a mathematical proof, demonstrating why you should both take a sabbatical next year for a proper family honeymoon. We're thinking a world tour of famous physics laboratories, with stops at all major theatrical venues. Milo added, for cultural balance, we're not even. Lila began. But Elias cut her off by sliding something across the table. It was an old envelope, worn at the edges, addressed to the future Dr. Lila Harper in his distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter, dated just days after their separation. Never sent but carefully preserved. I wrote this, the day I discovered Victor's plot. Elias explained quietly. I've carried it ever since. Hoping someday I'd have the chance, Lila opened the letter with trembling fingers, reading aloud. My dearest Lila, some equations take years to solve, but their solutions are worth every moment of calculation. You are, and always have been, my most important variable, the one factor that makes all other calculations meaningful. If you're reading this, it means our sons, how strange and wonderful to write those words, have succeeded where their father failed. They've proven that love, like quantum entanglement, transcends time and space and misunderstanding. Will you help me solve our future's equation, this time with all our variables accounted for? Through tears, Lila looked up to find Elias kneeling beside her chair, holding not the simple solitaire of their first engagement, but a ring designed to look like a mathematical formula wrapped around infinity. The boys helped design it, he explained softly. Apparently, they inherited your eye for detail and my love of mathematical symbolism. We calculated the exact angle for optimal light refraction, Theo announced proudly, and made sure the infinity symbol would be visible during dramatic hand gestures, Milo added. Lila looked at her sons, their brilliant, scheming, wonderful sons, and then at Elias, who still had the same hopeful expression she'd fallen in love with 15 years ago in a physics lab. Yes, she whispered, yes to all of it. Though we're still discussing that world tour idea, the twins erupted in cheers, while their parents shared a kiss that had been 10 years in the making. Outside, the city continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, while inside, a family, once broken by lies, celebrated their reunion with laughter, tears, and knowing the twins, probably a few more PowerPoint presentations. We should warn your father about their tendency to hack secure systems, Lila murmured later, watching their sons excitedly plan what was sure to be the most mathematically precise wedding in history. I think he'd be proud, Elias smiled. They take after their mother, seeing impossible problems as challenges to be solved. With their father's strategic mind, Lila added, leaning into his embrace. From the living room came the sound of Milo practicing a wedding dance, while Theo calculated the optimal camera angles for maximum emotional impact. Their voices carried the same passion that had once filled a Columbia physics lab where their parents had first fallen in love. Some equations, after all, are meant to be solved together, even if it takes two scheming sons, one school play, and a decade of patience to reach the solution.